Okay. We would now like to welcome our second speaker, Captain Raghu Raman. Captain Raghu Raman started his exceptional career with the Indian Army. After leaving the Indian Army, where he worked for 11 years, Captain Raman joined Mahindra Group in 1998 and helped set up Mahindra United World College before being handpicked to create and head National Intelligence Grid, Ministry of Home Affairs in the Government of India. I now hand over the mic to him.
Tanvi, I don't think your camera is working. I can't see my image. I mean, I could see it until now, but now I don't see it. Can I just retry by logging on once more?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just give me a minute.
Yes, sir. You're visible now.
I'm visible now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Firstly, thanks again for this opportunity to speak with all of you. And I was listening.
So your audio has frozen, your video has frozen. I think there is an internet issue. In the meanwhile, guys, we will be having an interactive session after his speech. So put your questions in the chat box if you need to. Yes, sir.
All right. So, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let me get straight to my conversation before I get cut off again. This AirMeet has been a little bit of a sort of unstable platform I've noticed in the past also. But anyway, now we are here. I just wanted to share a few thoughts with all of you. I know many of you would now be in a state where you are getting ready to graduate. Some of you maybe a year later, 2 years later, and in many ways, a lot of the dreams you had, or at least the picture you had in front of you, has altered dramatically. And I think it does qualify for a major, I wouldn't call it a crisis, but definitely a major rethink in the way you think of your future, what you need to do immediately, how you can succeed in what I'm calling now a ruptured world. It's not a VUCA world now, it's a ruptured world. So I'll just share 4 or 5 aspects with you, which I think will be useful in what you need to do in the immediate future. By that I mean the next 6 months, a couple of years. That's the focus. I want to keep my focus limited to that. So to help me do that, I'm going to share a presentation. This is more for my reference. It doesn't have that much of text or anything on it, so it won't give you any information per se. But I think I'll use this just to sort of facilitate the conversation. Let me start by, yes. Can you see a screen on your window now? I mean, can you see the PPT on your screen?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to use this to basically talk about 4 or 5 points that I want to speak about. First, of course, I use the title A Ruptured World, and I think this slide, which is already about 6 months old, captures that really nicely. A company whose name most of us had not heard about came in from nowhere and became more valuable now than IBM in a matter of about 9 to 10 months. And another company, which was the darling of the Wall Street Journal, has crashed literally.
Father asked me to use my internet.
What?
Stuff. YouTube and stuff.
All right.
That's it, yeah, dude.
I think someone got the. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. I'll get back to. And you can see the slide, or the slide is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So as I was saying, the world has turned so topsy-turvy that anybody, even an investor or an analyst who understood business really, really well 2 years ago and made the prediction that this company will go up and that company will go down, probably that analyst himself has lost his job. That is the situation in which we are finding the world today. Now, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with a situation like this, where some of the fundamental rules we will have to revisit and relook at? So here are 4 or 5 pieces of advice which I'll share with you. It'll help you in terms of, I think it'll help you in terms of being able to hit the road running whenever you are required to do that after your studies are over. Well, actually, many of these principles you can leverage even now while you are in your studies. The first and foremost, I think, and this is something that I urge all young students, young potential people who are entering into the job market, is to learn the fundamentals first. I know it's very exciting for a lot of, I mean, when I was working with Reliance, we used to get literally thousands of engineers who would join us every year, and everybody wants to work in artificial intelligence, big data, Hadoop. And I think you have to learn the fundamentals of every business, the fundamentals of the deviation between what is taught to you in the academic schools, which is required because those are the frameworks and those are the models. But you have to learn also what is the deviation from the model that you were taught in colleges and the model that is followed in ground reality. Now, without having that fundamental knowledge, you will very often be navigating with a map which is not necessarily representative of that territory. So you will start seeing a lot of delta between what you have been taught and what is the application of that knowledge in the job environments that you will go to. I would strongly recommend that for the first 6 months to a year, you must believe that your education has actually gone 10 times more, because what you studied in colleges were largely academic, and of course it had its own practical aspects. I'm sure you had internships, and I'm sure you had those 6 weeks of internship with companies and all of that, but that is still a very, very abstracted view of what the real world, what the real industry, what the real teams, how do human beings work together, not engineers work together, but how do human beings work together. Those fundamentals are extremely necessary before you can move to the next level. I say this because a lot of people who want to join organizations believe, if they're MBAs, they believe that they should be working on the corporate strategy and the vision. If they're engineers, they believe they should be working on the next bleeding edge Tesla kind of a product. I think we need to realize that until and unless some fundamental grounding of a few years is done, it's kind of very difficult to apply the knowledge that we have learned academically into the real world. So have the patience for that. And that patience will definitely reward you, because it will create a very solid foundation for anything that you want to do later on. Most of you will now embark into a different life, because now from a student, you will become a leader. Of course, you may be a leader here also. I'm sure many of you are leading activities in the college, but now you'll be leading lives of people. Now your good decision, your bad decision, your concern or not being concerned, your empathy or not being empathetic, you're helping your subordinates reach the level or not caring about them will actually affect lives. It will affect the lives of your subordinates. It will affect the lives of their children. It will affect the lives of their aspirations, their dreams. Now, each one of you who are listening to me here belong to 0.00000001% of humanity. If you are from India, you can add one more zero. You won the lottery of life. You were born in the right family. Your parents gave you the right guidance. There was financial wherewithal. There was intellectual information. So many planets had to fall in line for you to be where you are today. If you don't believe me, just look out of your windows and look at the streets, and you will see children no different from you, wandering in the streets, looking for jobs or pushing carts, and but for the grace of God, you could have switched places. So don't take away the fact that what you have been blessed with is also a responsibility. And that responsibility, by the way, Tanvi, just doesn't come by donating some money to an orphanage. It comes by building the lives of troops who have been entrusted to you by serendipity. So wherever you will join, let's say you will join a company where you may have even 2 or 3 people who are working with you or reporting to you, or even are there in your sphere of influence. I think it's a moral responsibility that you have as a leader. And actually, that is good practicing of leadership. You don't become a great leader when you become a CEO of a big company. You don't become a leader then. You continuously practice that leadership at every level. You practice concern for your troops, even if you have only one person reporting. You don't say that I will wait until I have 20,000 people reporting to me and then I will become. You have to start practicing what you want to become in small, tiny measures, because it's those small choices which actually make a big difference in the end. It is not that big choice. It's not choosing which branch of electronics or engineering will I take, which college will I join, which MNC will I join. Those aren't choices that really shape you. They put you in a general line of direction. They put you in a pipeline. They put you in a, but it's the choices, the tiny choices that you make, that will I give my 100% to every job that is entrusted to me, regardless of whether I'm being observed or not. Will I find significance in every mundane task rather than waiting for significant tasks to come my way? These are the small choices that will shape you. And I want to share this one lesson of leadership that I learned as a young cadet in the Indian Military Academy, where our instructors used to teach us that there are no good troops, no bad troops. There are no good units, no bad units. There are only good officers and bad officers. So the next time you're tempted to think that the team I have is not okay, or the product I have is not okay, or the teacher I have is not okay, sometimes you might want to look around where something else is not okay, because troops are troops. The people who will be committed to you as your subordinates are exactly the same. What you do with them will actually make the difference. I like this sentence which says that be entrepreneurial in your mindset and don't aim just to become an entrepreneur. I know it's very fashionable for a lot of people who are, and rightfully so, who are graduating from colleges, engineering colleges, B schools and all, to do a startup, to create a new product, to become an entrepreneur rather than an employee. I don't think it's an either or choice. You can be very, very entrepreneurial in your mindset, even if you're an employee. Entrepreneurship is a state of mind. It is not a state of your logo or the kind of clothes that you're wearing, or a startup, or a working out of a co-working place, or that is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is a state of mind. So while we read stories about Steve Jobs, about how he started his company after dropping out of his B school and all of that, he didn't drop out of B school. He continued to stay there. He just switched his subjects. So he was entrepreneurial even as a student, deciding that this curriculum does not fit what I want to do, and using his entrepreneurial spirit to change the frameworks of the rule, even if that rule meant that he will have to drop out of the college. So I think entrepreneurship is a state of mind. Don't confuse it with the title of being an entrepreneur. So this world which will tell you that you can either be an employee or an entrepreneur, I don't think that's a true statement. You can be an entrepreneur or an entrepreneurial state of mind, regardless of what your job description or your job portfolio says. This is an important point to tell you, and I'll tell this to you with a story and an anecdote. So when I was with Reliance, as many of the other leaders of Reliance, whenever young engineers would join, they would be subjected to a foundation to familiarize themselves with the culture of Reliance, or the culture of Jio, or the departments that they're going to work in, and all of that. And many of us who were more sort of experienced leaders would speak to these young engineers. So I want to tell you a story which I would do for each one of those sessions. And I would, at about 1:20 1:25 in the afternoon, asked these students just before we were breaking for lunch that I have often wondered about a question in technology or whatever you want to call it, is why is it in India the cheaper phones have dual SIMs and the more expensive phones have only one SIM? Sounds weird. Why would a person who doesn't have the money, who can barely afford 1,000 rupees, 900 rupees, 1,300 rupees का फोन, उस फोन में 2 सिम, और जो 1 लाख का फोन है उसमें सिर्फ 1 सिम है? ये ऐसा क्यों है? चलो 1 लाख वाला मैं नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ, I'm not asking कि 1 लाख वाले में 1 सिम क्यों है, I'm asking this question that 900 रुपए वाले में 2 सिम क्यों है? And I asked this question, if this was an interactive session, I would have probably asked this question here and, let you give me some of the answers, and I had some fun with that. We would have all learned a lot of lessons. But the reason why I asked this question at 1:30 is because I tell them, now you're going to break for lunch and you can go and discuss it and try to figure out the answer. And what I want is 2 things. One, I want the answer as to why 2 SIMs are used in or are installed in a cheap phone. And more importantly, I want to know how you figured out that answer. How did you come to that answer? And yes, I mean, I can give you a minute or so. You can go to the chats and try and give some answers, try and give some theories as to why the cheaper phones have dual SIM while the expensive ones have one. And the usual theories are because they are sharing the phone with somebody else. I mean, if you're sharing the phone, you won't have dual SIM, right? You will have only one SIM. How can you share a phone? Phone is a one. So these theories and all come up. And once in a while, once in maybe about 5 or 6 such courses, one odd student would come up with the real answer. The real answer, I'm giving the answer to you because I want to teach a lesson after that. The real answer is because in India, incoming calls are free. And so your sabzi wala, your massage wala, the chai wala, the kulfi wala in your campus, he has to have one number which he has to give to his customers in perpetuity, because that number should not change because it's an incoming call and incoming call is free. And he'll use the other SIM depending on which service provider is providing a cheaper connection or a pack of SMS or 5 GB data free. So he'll keep switching between the other one and choosing the cheapest option. Now, the lesson to this story is that the reason why I ask them to give me this answer at 1:30, when they meet me after lunch is done, it's not because they would have 1 hour to do a focus group and Philip Kotler and engineering theory and all, because they would have 1 hour in which they could ask the waiters, they could ask the security guys, they could ask the watchmen, they could ask the housekeeping fellows, all of whom are wandering around there, ki bhai, ye tum phone mein 2 SIM kyun hota hai? And he'll give you the answer straight away. But unfortunately, we have spent money getting a degree. We now have this degree behind us. So if we can hold a nose like this, why should we hold? I think there is a lesson here. We need to have the humility to realize that a degree doesn't tell us what is happening on ground in front of us. The people who can tell us what is happening are those people who are actually using the technology, living with it, leveraging it. Those are the people who will be able to give us a far, far richer and a much, much more pertinent education. Don't forget that. Adjunct to that is also, you are from IIT, so one of the premier colleges, and therefore you are the cream of this nation. And therefore, I mean, I'm sure when you cleared IIT, you must have been the toast of the colony. Your colony wale and neighbors must have come to congratulate you and all of that. Congratulate your parents ki kitne kismat wale ho dekho. Many of you might be the ones jo baki parents must be pointing towards you and saying, dekho tum uske jaise Sharma ji ke ladke ki tarah kyun nahi ho sakta? All that stuff. So it makes us believe that we are very, very intelligent. But we must always have the humility to relearn. And I'll give you this story, which is my favorite story about the importance of humility, and especially amongst engineers who are high-tech engineers. So this story is about 18, 20 years old when there were no mobile phones. I mean, there were no smartphones, definitely at that point of time, and definitely not affordable. And at that point, there was a friend of mine who was an IAS officer. He was a DM in Kerala in the Ambalappuzha district. And some of you who know that district will know it's largely a fishing village, and these are fishermen who go into the deep sea. So my friend had some surplus funds left. And what he did was he bought them GPSs. Garmin GPSs. So those days GPSs were novelty item. These guys were trying to figure out kya hota hai GPS, but the fishermen. But in the end, they figured it out. Now, my friend had given them these GPSs so that in case there was a storm or in case there was some problem or whatever, then the fishermen will be able to navigate back using that GPS. Now, what he forgot was that these fishermen were the progeny of generations and generations of seagoing people. They didn't need they could look at the sky, they could look at the bird, they could look at the water, the wind direction, and they would know how to reach back home. So, complete waste of money. Or so we thought. But this is what the fishermen started doing with the GPS. They would go to the fish market. They would collect all the
Sir,
garbage.
I'm really sorry, but since our schedule is packed, I just want to tell you that you have another 5 to 6 minutes, 7 minutes. I'm really sorry for this.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll finish in the next 2 minutes anyways. So 2 to 3 minutes. Where was I? I forgot.
Fishermen having
Yeah, they would go to the fish market, pick up all the garbage there, and throw that garbage into gunny sacks, and then take those gunny sacks into the high sea and dump it there and mark that spot with the GPS. Now, what would happen is when they came back there the next day, it would be full of fish which have been attracted by this garbage. So my educated, by the way, he's also from IIT, IIT and IIM. IIM educated friend gave them a device so that they could navigate back home, and my illiterate country cousins used it to navigate into the sea, improve their fishing catch, reduce carbon footprint, manage the market supply, demand supply, and all of that. So always remember that you must have the humility to relearn from anything and anyone around you. That is your best school. It is the best school in the world. Last point I want to share with you is that optimism is a state of mind. And your job as leaders is to be optimistic. This is your job description. I don't think any company is looking for young leaders who come in and create a 100-slide presentation as to why something cannot be done. We are not looking at that. Nobody is looking at that. What they're looking at is a sense of optimism, a sense of I can make this happen. I'll figure out. Karna to hai. Isko bhi kaise karna hai, I'll figure it out. That optimism itself at times opens the roads for you, opens the paths for you, because your brain, it's actually a scientific aspect. Your brain constantly is looking for opportunities if you're optimistic. But if you're pessimistic, your brain is constantly looking for threats. Now, this is not an inborn trait. Don't think that, this guy is optimistic, that guy is pessimistic. This is a practiced trait. So just like you learned calculus, just like you learned complex equations, you can't say, okay, this person has an aptitude for, yes, you have an aptitude for mathematics, but you still have to put hard work into learning those frameworks. Similarly, a sense of optimism is something that you have to learn, and that you have to learn by practicing. And in some sense, if a catastrophe had to hit your life, all of our lives, we have to have 2 or 3, 5 or 10 catastrophes. We can't avoid that. It's part of the deal. Then it's best that the catastrophe happened at the earliest stage of your career, when you're just breaking into your job, you're being, athletes, international athletes, when they're being, or athletes who have been trained for international events, whenever they are trained, they are taken to high altitude. And they're trained in high altitude. They're trained there because the oxygen level is low there. The body metabolism slows down. So when they're trained under such tough conditions and then launched into sea level, their performance just shoots up. In many ways, you are entering a phase of very high altitude, low oxygen, and low metabolism training, because yes, the velocity of business is going to reduce, the opportunities will also reduce. But anybody who manages innovation and creativity, because innovation and creativity only come in constraints, they never come in plenitude. That 2 SIM card story will only happen to a person who cannot afford it. Only that person will have the intelligence to use that. So in a way, if you look at 2 facts, one, all of us will have our share of bad luck and bad instances which will happen in life. In some sense, it's happening at a stage when you are most resilient. Not all of us. I'm sure many of you have financial difficulties and loans to pay off and all, but you're young. You have the ability to take punches and get up again. You're not, most of you are hoping not married with kids and all to look after EMIs to pay and all of that. So you're at your most resilient. And two, if you are trained in this arduous environment, then when the situation becomes better, you will, just like that athlete who comes from the high altitude to sea level and performance improves by exponential times, I think you will also have that advantage and that benefit. So with that, I just want to tell you that despite there being these crises and all of that, there are hundreds and hundreds of new opportunities which are emerging. And thankfully, most of them are emerging in technology areas. And thankfully, most of you are engineering students. So in a way, even if there is a time of bad luck, you possibly are some of the luckiest people in bad times. So if there are any questions or if we have time for questions, I'll love to take them on. Otherwise, you have my Twitter handle here. You can tweet me your questions, and most of what I discussed with you is also there on my website. In case you want to know more details, get some more information, you can go and visit that. Thanks a ton, Tanvi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Again, another very inspiring session. We would have loved to have an interactive session, but due to some technical issues, things were delayed. Now we're on a very tight schedule. So I think anybody who has a question can mail you or reach you out on your social media. I hope that's okay.
More than mailing, I think a tweet would be better.
Okay, so
I check my mail sporadically. So
okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
thanks a ton. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.